joining me again. As you can see, we got another Farmall in the shop. And if you got a cub that's leaking gear oil out of the inspection plate for the clutch, here's how to fix it. I want to go over a couple things before we start tearing this apart. So right here's the transmission, and here's the torque tube where the transmission bolts to, and the torque tube goes all the way up here to the clutch, and here's the inspection cover. What happens is the oil will leak out of either the seal up on top where the input shaft is, or it'll leak out around the gasket on the lower shaft, bearing cover. So usually, like if they get water in them, it'll push the oil level way up to where it's not supposed to be, and it'll start running out. Right here's the drain plug for the transmission. I was just showing you the drain plug for the transmission. If you come up the side, right here by the muffler, there's a plug right here. That's your full indicator. You take that out and you start putting oil in it until it starts to run out that hole. Once it starts coming out, it's full. Then up on top of the transmission is the fill plug right here. So take a 2x4 or some wood and make you a wedge. And you're going to want to wedge it under here on this side, and you're going to want to wedge it under here on this side. That way it locks that front axle so that the tractor can't tilt. And of course on these Farmall Cubs and the A's, the engines are offset. So it's all the weight is on one side. So you want to lock that front axle, because as soon as you unbolt the transmission and the torque tube, this tractor is going to want to go to one side and it'll probably roll over. Now, once we go to separate this, the top shaft in the transmission goes all the way through, goes up through the torque tube, and it goes all the way up, and it splines in with the clutch. That's all one shaft. So when this rear end comes off, make sure there's plenty of room, because you're going to have to go the length of from here to right here, and that's going to have to go completely out the back up against the garage door there, so that I can slide those that seal and the gasket off the front of that shaft and all the way out. So if you got oil coming out the inspection cover for the clutch, make sure that the transmission is not full of water and raising that oil level up and letting it go up the torque tube. The other thing, since the owner told me that he already drained the oil out of this and it was full of water, it's possible that it has cracked the transmission case, and I'd have to take it and have it re-welded. And the other thing it could be is just the seals are bad and that the gaskets are leaking. Hopefully it's just the lower shaft gaskets leaking on the bearing plate. But if I have to, I'll have to separate the final drives off each side and take the transmission out to a machine shop and have it welded up. I hope it's not that, because that can get a little expensive, but I mean, if it is, it needs to be fixed. So I already got started on this, the littler stuff. So you want to unhook your two brake linkages. This, pull the pin out and the cotter pin, and the same on this side right here. You want to remove your toolbox, and you want to remove your battery box, and this bolt right here. Then underneath there will be a bolt here and a bolt here. This one is stuck, and the head of it's pretty much rounded off, so we'll have to use an easy out to get that out. This bolt was really hard to get out. I had to put a little bit of heat to it. I'm hoping I can just slide this pan out without pulling this bolt back here, but if I have to, I'll undo the seat, pull it up out, then where I can get in there from the impact and a torch and get on that one. And around back, I removed the rod for your lift here. And I just undid the bracket for the muffler. I'm going to leave the floor pan along with the pedals right there with the torque tube. Then the transmission here will just slide out the back. And don't forget about this bolt right here. Then you see where there used to be one right here, but it looks like it's already missing. Okay, I just put these two bolts back in here to keep everything from moving. You're going to remove this cotter pin, then remove this 1-inch nut. Then you'll have to very easily pry this bearing off the end of the shaft. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled this lower bearing and checking the shims and stuff. This transmission didn't really have any noise to it from what little bit that I seen it run. So I'm gonna clean that up, put the shims and stuff back, then put the plate on, then a new gasket, then the front cover goes on that. So we can make sure that's good and sealed up, because that sees a lot more oil than the seal up here. Now here's the front of the seal, and if you flip it around, you can see that the spring is laying loose in there. And so that this seal is completely destroyed. See, and well, there comes the spring now. So that was our problem, was just this seal. And I got a new one and some gaskets. So our next step will be putting this thing back together and getting everything sealed up. As you can see, that oil's a little milky, so it's still got water in it. The owner said that it had water in it when he got it. So I'm going to drain all that out and put new oil in it. Try to get as much of that water out as I can. Then we'll have to go up here and clean up the torque tube. There's still a bunch of oil laying in it. And then we'll start putting this thing back together. So overall, it's not hateful to do. Just you gotta be careful. Things are very heavy, and you do not need this tractor rolling over or a strap or something broke. It has two straps on the front, and I have one strap wrapped around twice on the back to keep everything upright. The big challenge is going to be getting this input shaft to go up through the clutch and into the pilot bearing and getting the splines lined up. It may be a two-person job. I don't know. I might have to get help on that one. On the bearing retainer for your lower shaft, this is the front of the bearing. If you turn it around, there's like a rubber O-ring that goes around the bearing. You need to make sure that's still there because that's your seal. Then your shims, then they will sit right on top of it just like that. The O-ring on the bearing plate will seal up right here on this tapered edge. Okay, so I got my input shaft seal in, and I got the shims and everything back in. I got the new gasket in, and I just took a wire wheel and cleaned up the surfaces where this seal sits in here, or I should say gasket. I didn't have a whole lot of time to record as much as I wanted. I had to get that back to the owner. So all the parts I used were from Steiner's tractor. That's pretty much the only place I use. I'm not sponsored. I just had really good service out of them, and I like their parts. And I'm gonna go ahead and put the part numbers up on the screen here for you. And pretty much after the last clip there, all I did was just put the two halves back together and start it up, make sure everything was fine. Took me about probably half hour to put it back together, get the splines to line up, and actually everything as far as the splines and the clutch disc and the pilot bearing, everything went together pretty easily actually. You do gotta be careful. You don't need anything slipping or falling because it'll mess that shaft up or the transmission, maybe even the bearings. So thanks for watching, and here's those the part numbers I used, and I got some replacement numbers here as well to give you. So I'll see you next time.